came to Tasmania for the first time 10 years ago, and I'd grown up in Queensland and hadn't seen forest like Tasmania's forest before. And I still remember the first night I went on an action, and I woke up in the morning in the middle of this clear fell and surrounded by these stumps and fallen trees, and it was just really shocking to see for the first time the destruction that happens here. I decided to go for a walk, and so I crossed that threshold out of the clearfell into the forest, and that was my first experience of these forests. And I remember standing under this ancient tree that would have been hundreds of years old, towering above me and surrounded by rainforest that was full of moss and so green, and it was amazing to experience that forest. And then stepping back out of that into the clearfell, it really hit me, and that's when I realised that this destruction has to end, and I've been passionate about forest defence ever since. We were camped out here in the forest setting up the platform, and we woke up one morning to the sound of machines. Sneaking down there we could see trees falling to the sound of chainsaws and realised they'd started logging here. So we had to set up the rest in silence, being really careful that they didn't realise we were here. And I remember setting up climb lines, hauling up all the gear to the platform as quietly as we could. The next morning I remember putting my harness on, connecting to the ropes, not knowing how long it would be before I would take it off again. I remember the last moment when my feet left the ground and I started climbing the tree, hearing the sound of logging so close, and knowing that I wouldn't put my feet back down here again until the forest was protected. Observatory is an ancient eucalypt around 400 years old, and the platform is close to the top of the tree. It sits at about 60 metres. And I chose this tree basically because it's here at the top of the ridge and it overlooks the rest of this valley, and so it overlooks the area that they were due to log. My intention was if they did log around me, I would film that and stream it live onto the internet so that people all around the world could see the destruction that occurs when they log these forests. 4 months before I went up the tree, the Australian government made an announcement that would put a conservation agreement across 430,000 hectares, including this forest, but they never actually put it in place. And that meant people all around Australia, all around the world, believed that these forests were safe. And I wanted to go up the tree so that I could show people this is what's going on here in Tasmania. The forests aren't safe and they're still falling. I stayed in observatory for 449 days without putting my feet on the ground. The best thing about being in the tree was the experience of being immersed in the forest day in and day out. And being up there for over a year meant I got to see all 4 seasons come and go and witness the change of the forest in summer, the snow in winter, which was absolutely beautiful, and all the birds that came to visit me over the time. So I think just that connection that I developed to the tree and to the forest around me is something that is really important to me, and still, you know, when I come out here I still feel that connection, and it's really amazing. Eventually I was forced to evacuate the tree due to a deliberately lit bushfire that was about 1.5 kilometres from the tree. I stayed in the tree for 2 days after the fire started, And in that time I watched it grow. I could see the flames and I could hear trees falling and cracking into the fire, and I knew it just wasn't safe to stay anymore, so sadly I had to make that decision to get down.
Why would someone light a fire?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I just don't like saying things when we can't back them up with evidence. So I don't know who lit it and why. The idea for observatory really came out of my experiences of living at the blockade at the Florentine. We're here in the Upper Florentine Valley in southwest Tasmania, and this is the site of Camp Florentine, which was Tasmania's longest running forest blockade. It was set up 7.5 years ago when this whole valley here was threatened by logging. At the blockade we would have a number of tree sits, and they'd be connected by ropes to structures that would block the road, basically meaning that there would be no ability for them to get machines or trucks or anything into the valley. And we'd also have tunnels that people would go down into under the road, and lock-ons and dragons as well to stop the machines getting through. Over time the blockade really built a lot of momentum, and there were more and more people coming out here, and some of the most inspiring times were when we'd have community days, and we'd have times during bust when people from all walks of life who'd never been arrested before, many never been to an action before, who would come out here and be willing to cross police lines, walk into the logging coupe and stop logging. One of the hardest parts about being involved in this campaign was the times when police busted the camp. I think for me to be here, it can be really hard to come back here and be here with these stumps of those trees that we lost during that time. Right now I'm sitting on the stump of a tree that we used to call Old Fronty, or front sit, and it's a tree that I used to spend a lot of time in. We had a tree sit and I'd spent many nights climbing up to that tree and living in that tree. I remember the day it got cut down. The police were here guarding the camp and they made us stand down on Gordon River Road, and we weren't able to get into the campsite at all. So I just stood there without being able to do anything and watched as they cut down my favourite tree in the world. And I think that that's one of the hardest experiences I've had as an activist, to be so connected to a tree and then to just stand there and watch it fall. And especially when your relationship with that forest is one where you really want to protect it and you spend so much time trying to protect it, to be in that situation where that tree's falling and there's nothing you can do is really hard. The blockade went for 6.5 years, and in that time successfully managed to stop most of the logging that happened here and eventually win World Heritage protection for this valley.
Why did it take direct action to get World Heritage?
The battle to get World Heritage protection for these forests has been going for over 2 decades, and the fact is that if we'd waited for that World Heritage process to take place, which takes a very long time, then by the time we did get the World Heritage protection it would have been too late for the Upper Florentine. We would have had 15 clear fells scattered throughout this valley and basically destroying the entire valley before it ever had the chance to get protected. It's been about a year since I got out of the tree, and in that time I come to visit every now and again. Every time I'm walking up the path, up the hill towards the tree, I feel anxious that there's the potential that it might have been cut down. Obviously, if that happened, I'd be really devastated, because while I was in the tree, I developed such a strong connection to this tree and feel really close to it. But I think I'd also realise that the forest is more than just an individual tree, and my fight here in Observatory was about much more than just protecting this one tree. It was about protecting the entire ecosystem and all of these forests. So I guess I would want Observatory's sacrifice not to be in vain, and for people to keep fighting and keep protecting these forests. And I think that's something that we all need to keep doing because they are still under threat.
So did you find that this was a successful tree sit?
I feel like the observatory campaign was really successful because it was able to spread the message around the globe about Tasmania's forest and really built an international movement for the support of these forests and to fight for protection of these forests. The World Heritage Committee met in June of 2013 and unanimously all countries voted for the extension, and this area was officially listed and still is World Heritage. I think one of the most amazing experiences is to come back out to the Florentine and walk amongst the ancient trees here and to know that they would have been stumps standing in the middle of a clear fell if we hadn't have blockaded and taken direct action, and to stand there amongst this forest now and know it's here because of what we've done and now it's World Heritage protected is an amazing feeling. It's obviously with mixed emotions because at the same time as celebrating this win, we also have to keep fighting. A whole bunch of those forests that were recently World Heritage listed are potentially going to be under threat. The Australian government recently made a nomination to the World Heritage Committee to have a lot of those forests taken off the list, and areas like the Florentine may potentially be opened up for logging if that happens. Our forests here are being logged to provide wood for a company called who are also logging in Sarawak and are responsible for the displacement of Indigenous communities there. They're actually selling the wood from Tasmania in the international marketplace and lying and saying it's from environmentally friendly sources with the tick of approval of some Australian environment groups. And so for this reason we need to keep fighting and keep spreading the word about what's really happening here. On a global scale, the world's already lost the majority of its original forest cover, and here in Tasmania we are down to the last remaining patches of ancient forest. The recent World Heritage listing of these forests shows that they are globally significant, and I think it's important therefore for people not just in Tasmania but right around the world to understand the values of these forests and to stand with us in defending them. I just find it hard to talk about success because I don't want to be like, yay, we won, and then people think everything's good. So I always feel like weird about talking about success. I had to do a whole speech once at this conference and the topic was like success. I think my speech was a bit depressing because it was all about not celebrating success to the point where you forget that you have to keep fighting.
I believe it's possible because I've already seen it happen right here on this road where we're standing today. A taste of what is possible when we have the courage to stand up and fight for and create the future that we want to see. So I'm inviting every one of you today to make that commitment to stand with me and know that this rally here is just the beginning, and we will keep on fighting and keep on going until we see a guaranteed future and the survival of these forests for future generations. Thank you.
Would you do this again if you had to?
I would definitely do it again if I had to. I would do whatever it takes for these forests to survive into the future.